Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Remember when Mammy Oprah tried and failed to endorse that documentary about Russell Simmons that was supposed to be on Apple Plus? Oprah and the white executives at Apple were trying to give him the Cosby treatment, but the grassroots called her out on it, and she was forced to back out of the project, claiming that she suddenly had problems with this smear piece. Well, Apple decided that without the cover of a black face, that is Oprah, to hide behind, they didn't want their name associated with it, so all of a sudden this very worthy project that they were so enthused about and had this big announcement for it, all of a sudden they were looking, anybody else want this? We're not interested anymore. Anybody want this? Anybody at all? So the two talentless nobodies who made that propaganda piece shopped it to HBO. The same HBO who made Leaving Neverland in 2019. The Russell Simmons mockumentary, which will remain unnamed out of contempt, did debut in 2020, just a year after Leaving Neverland, but I'll bet you didn't hear about it, did you? See, the white media has been trying aggressively to keep up a steady drumbeat of anti-black stories, to make black men the face of sexual predation in America. All those white faces that you saw, that lineup of white sexual predators, we gotta do some counter-programming. We gotta get this off of us and onto those black men. But when you look at who it is who runs these white media companies, you see why. But since they control these networks and studios, they have the ability to tell their employees to go make up some propaganda piece. Well, it's 2022 now. It's been a few years since the white media was able to get any of their anti-black propaganda the kind of attention that they need them to have. They put out Surviving R. Kelly Part 2 in January 2020, but the murder of George Floyd a couple of months later and the uprisings that followed blew that trash right out of the news feeds and the algorithms. And the contested 2020 election followed by the Trump coup attempt kept the anti-black rape documentaries from being able to get any steam in 2021. That's the reason why you haven't been seeing the white media going all out with any of this garbage for the last 2 years. That steady drumbeat was interrupted 2 years ago, so now we see the white media trying to get that engine running again. Enter failed comedian and wannabe social critic, worthless Kamau Bell, or as I'm going to start calling him from now on, Dumb Bell, who, like Oprah before him, agreed to be the face of this hit piece. And please don't kid yourself by pretending that this clown was the brains behind this operation. First of all, brains and Kamau Dumb Bell don't belong in the same sentence. And secondly, Showtime was the company that put up the money to make 4 hours of repackaged phony claims, disproven accusations, and outright lies. Dumb Bell had nothing to do with this other than to be the front man for it. So at this point, you're probably wondering, is anybody buying into the BS that Dumb Bell's been selling? Well, if Showtime's own YouTube channel is any indication, the answer is a resounding no. The trailer for Bell's attack piece got over 1 million views, but it only managed to get a little over 800 likes. Now, what does that tell you? What that tells me is with 1 million views and only 800 people who bothered to say that they liked it, that indicates to me that this was some sort of ad that was placed. Just showing it on people's video feeds, this or that anonymous ad before the video plays, that's what it tells me. How do 1 million people watch your video, but less than 0.1% even bother to say that they liked it? This explosive documentary, this bombshell, as the white media put it, has turned out to be a dud. But when we're talking about the white media, we're talking about multi-billion-dollar corporations, not some mom-and-pop operation. The money they gave Kamau Dumb Bell wasn't even pocket change for the white media. Hell, it wasn't even pocket lint. The white media can easily afford to make these attack pieces because they cost these white media companies nothing to make, though they serve a vital purpose for the sexually rapacious white media executives who run these companies to get the attention off of themselves and onto someone else. And while we're on the subject of Dumb Bell, he was of course in the white media this week, desperately trying to gin up some attention for his mockumentary, and as we've seen with the white media when it comes to the police, Dumb Bell is strictly limiting his appearances to the white media outlet sound stages in their private little studios, because he already knows he's got outlets who won't ask any common sense questions about how all these accusations are patently and provably false. Kamau Dumb Bell's not talking to the public. He instead only talks to white media outlets who he already knows in advance are going to push this anti-black propaganda. No surprise, he was on CBS this morning with no less than Gayle Skank at the table. Now, this is the same CBS where serial sexual predator Les Moonves was the man in charge running the company. The very show that Bell was on yesterday morning is the exact same show that the now infamous sexual predator Charlie Rose was on. And Gayle Skank worked with Rose. So why didn't Moonves or Rose's name come up during this interview? After all, Bell was regurgitating the talking point. This was about powerful men. This is about powerful men. And they're all over the media about powerful men.
And the other part of it is this is bigger than Cosby. Like, powerful men in media sexually assaulting, harassing, raping women is a story that is not one man, one network. We all know it happens all throughout the industry, everywhere where we sit.
Yeah, Bell, it happens exactly where you're sitting. You're probably sitting in the same chair that the sexual predator Charlie Rose was sitting in. You're certainly sitting in the same CBS studio that the rapacious Les Moonves was running up until just a few years ago. But of course, Kamau Bell doesn't mention any of their names. Because this is bigger than Cosby, don't you know? During his pathetic sales pitch, Bell kept using the worn-out phrase, "have a conversation." But he admits that they didn't want to talk to Cosby.
In 4 parts, you spoke to a lot of people, but you didn't speak or reach out to Cosby's camp, and they commented and said that they're having a bigger statement tomorrow, but basically called this baseless and had problems with the fact that they didn't have any input, I guess, in this film.
I mean, Bill Cosby and his camp has been very clear about where they stand on this. And this, to me, was about reckoning with the legacy and reckoning with what we can learn from this. And I think we have clips of Bill Cosby throughout to show what he thinks about these things and how he feels about these things. It didn't feel like if you're going to put the survivors in here, that you also then put Bill Cosby in here.
You just heard it for yourself. They didn't want Cosby in it. Now, this is supposed to be a conversation? The only reason that anyone even is noticing this garbage enough to insult it is because it involves Cosby. But Bell admits they did not want Cosby in it. It's not a matter of, well, we didn't have time. We didn't want him in it. That's not how a conversation works. A conversation involves both parties, at least 2. When only one person is speaking and everyone else can only listen, that's not a conversation at all. That's a monologue. For the white media to use, or in this case misuse, the word conversation, that's white media weasel words. Conversation implies an exchange of ideas between at least 2 people. And even if it doesn't end with a meeting of the minds, at the very least, every conversation ends with both sides getting to have their say. But as Bell admits, the entire point of this documentary was to dump on Cosby. That's it. That was the entire purpose of it. That's not a conversation. That's slander. That's defamation. That's anti-black racism. But I thought the most telling confession this clown gave was when he said that when they made this mockumentary, they all thought that Cosby was going to be in prison for the rest of his life, that he would die in prison.
At the time when you were shooting it, did you think the Bill Cosby story was over? Because when you started, he was actually in jail.
Yeah, it seemed like he was going to be in jail for the rest of his life at his age, so I thought this is the time we can have the conversation.
Now you see the sick mentality at work? Just like when some race soldier murders a black person. Well, now that the black guy's dead, it's going to be our word versus the dead guy. Doesn't matter if it's the enforcement arm of white supremacy or the propaganda arm of white supremacy. They're all part of the white supremacist apparatus, so they all operate out of the same playbook. But this is the kind of coward and scumbag that Kamau Bell is. He doesn't go to Bill Cosby, even after the conviction. He doesn't go to Cosby and say, you know what, at the very least we should hear both sides of the story. Instead it's, nah, I don't want to hear from him. We need to be speaking to these, victims. And we're gonna, we all think he's gonna die in prison, so it doesn't really matter. We don't think that he can do anything about it. That's what he's really saying. We're gonna demonize him, we're gonna slanderize him, we're gonna libel the man, we're gonna do everything we can to destroy his reputation, and he won't be able to do anything about it because he's behind bars, and hey, he's gonna die in there anyway. I mean, look how old he is. He's already blind as it is. His health ain't the greatest. Prison will kill him. That's what they thought. But unfortunately for the white media, Bill Cosby turned out to be a hell of a lot tougher than Kamau Bell will ever be. Now, for those of you who watched my video on Sunday, which was about Kamau Bell, that's exactly what I told you the plan was. Now, you hardly have to be Nostradamus to know that this was the plan. They were telegraphing this from the beginning, but it's the fact that they're coming out and admitting it because they can't deny it. They were in too deep. The entire mockumentary's premise was Cosby's in prison. We're going to talk about how he got put in prison, and that's the end of him. And then as soon as these clowns were ready to wrap this thing up, okay, we can go ahead and release this and have our little happy ending for our anti-black hit piece. Next thing you know, the hand of the ancestors, or whomever your favorite deity may be, moved, and Cosby was not only out of prison, but the illegal conviction was thrown out. It was overturned. Kamau Bell, on the other hand, this is supposed to be a piece about the truth, so it'd be about newsworthiness. Yeah, and then we ask him, gee, how is it that Cosby's out of prison and the conviction's overturned? That doesn't come up, because that's the kind of conversation the white media wants. They want a monologue dictated to you. That's not a conversation, family. Don't let these scumbags use weasel words like that. And don't let them try to impress you by saying such and such film screened at Sundance, as if that's supposed to give it artistic legitimacy. The Sundance Film Festival has made itself the go-to spot for these racist screeds to be presented to the public because Sundance had a reputation for being an independent film festival. But let me tell you, family, that was a long time ago. The Sundance Film Festival stopped being about micro-budget flicks and movies financed with credit cards back in the 90s. For those of you in the Gen X or the Black Baby Boomer crowd who might remember Sundance and what it was based on reputation, or the younger cats who might have heard of it and the white media branded it as some sort of independent film festival, please, they have not been that in over a generation. Now, they still go ahead and play on that old, long since invalid reputation, because if they didn't, then they would have to admit that they were nothing more than just another presentation by the big studios. So that's the game that they're playing at Sundance. But this attack piece on Cosby, all of them in fact, this happens to give you a microcosm of how white supremacy works. It controls the entire process from beginning to end. First, they put up the money for some hit piece, and they make sure they get some front Negro to present this trash. That way they don't have to put their faces out there. And then they have the piece that they presented taken to a film festival that they themselves run and control and decide what gets screened and what doesn't. And because of this film festival's reputation that they paid a lot of money to manufacture over the years as an indie film festival, the white media outlets, particularly the ones online, treat it as if Kamau Bell used his own money to make this. They don't talk about the big white money behind it, or any of the seedy white media executives and their sexual predation that's behind the scenes. Instead, they pretend like, okay, we'll play along. It's just some innocent little indie flick and not the corporate propaganda piece that it actually is. And then after it screens at Sundance, or at least in preparation to do so, you got the white media outlets owned by these white corporations who breathlessly report, oh, this is amazing. It's unbelievable. It's explosive. You have got to see this. Every step of the process is carried out by a white media or white corporate owned entity who is simply playing their part in an assembly line of lies. But while Kamau Bell and the white media have been busy rehashing long disproven lies and gossip about Bill Cosby, there's been another film screening at Sundance this year that the white media isn't talking about. Salute to Texas FBA Forever for putting this in my mentions, by the way. Now, you probably recognize Rachel Evan Wood. Maybe the name rings a bell, if not necessarily the face. She's an actress. If you don't recognize her, that's understandable. She has the acting range of a pine tree, which perfectly describes her performances. Wooden. But Rachel Wood was romantically involved with Marilyn Manson, and the two of them were an item for a time. But now she's singing a totally different story today, one of abuse, physical branding, and even rape. Now, this isn't the first time Marilyn Manson's name has been attached to accusations of sexual assault. At least 16 women have already said that he abused them, but Rachel Wood's the most high profile. She's been making public accusations against Marilyn Manson since at least February 2021, when she called him out by name. And now she's made a documentary where she talks about it. But who's not talking about it is the white media. You have one of the most famous music performers on the planet, with over a dozen women, including a well-known Hollywood actress, accusing him of sexual abuse, and the white media's not making wall-to-wall documentaries about it. No stories day in and day out. MTV ain't discussing it. VH1 ain't talking about it. They're all ignoring it. Because once you start talking about white performers who abuse women, you then begin down the road of the white talent agents, like Adam Bennett, who Terry Crews accused of groping him. Next, the white on-air talent like Matt Lauer and Bill O'Reilly. Then the white producers like Don Hewitt. And then finally, the white executives like Les Moonves and Roger Ailes. Oh yeah, it's a slippery slope indeed. That's what happens when you got these conspiracies of silence going on. You gotta circle the wagons, and even if you don't even like the person that you have to cover for, you gotta do it anyway, because if you let this guy go, he's gonna be just the first domino. You will be the third or fourth. That's how these little alliances among these white supremacists works. That's why they do it like this. They're gonna make sure to stick up for him, not because they're worried about what happens to him, they're worried about what happens next if they don't. Because if enough attention is put onto them, just as we've seen with police violence, if enough sustained attention is on all of these white executives and such who are getting away with sexual assaults and misconduct, sooner or later the public's going to start demanding to know, gee, when are these guys ever going to go to prison? Oh, the police, with the white media's connivance and support, they thought that they had gotten their necks out of the noose. And for a while, a few of the clowns of false news and over CNN and MSNBC tried to pretend like they had. They thought that they had actually gotten away with something. And then the convictions began because people started wondering, when are these guys going to go, oh my God, they really are able to just defy the law. The law doesn't apply to them. And then people had enough, and now they're going to prison regularly. Not as many as they should, not as often as they should. But it is finally starting to happen. The white media is looking at that and going, man, we couldn't even stop the enforcement arm of white supremacy from going to prison. We couldn't even protect them. How are we going to protect ourselves? Well, we're going to make sure that there's not sustained attention on us any way we can. The police may not have a dedicated PR apparatus, but we do. The public's saying we need to have a conversation about all these sexual predators who keep getting away with it. And the white media is looking and going, oh, hell no, the last thing we want is a conversation. We want a monologue. It doesn't have to be true just so long as it's about black men, because that's the furthest that you can get away from the white power structure. Oh, and by the way, on a side note, before anyone goes thinking that Rachel Evan Wood is on the side of the angels, don't. After Kobe Bryant died, this heifer went on Twitter and slandered the man, calling him a rapist. When she got called out on it, she then, like a coward, tried to clean it up with the asinine word salad that she wasn't condemning or celebrating. There's room for everyone to grieve, and please show kindness and respect to all. Well, that's the exact opposite of what she did. Kobe Bryant had died, and his teenage daughter was on the helicopter with him. She died too, a child. And with this man not even buried, this is what Rachel Evan Wood did? So if she's expecting people to just fall to their knees crying tears for her, she's going to be waiting a long while. She is hardly the picture of a sympathetic individual. There's no good guys here. Just understand that. There's no honor among thieves either. What you have here are a lot of aging and irrelevant white actresses and a ton of never-gonna-be's who are trying to cash in right now. As the white media executives see it, they're just trying to ride out the storm without having to throw any more of their pals overboard. But this only works if white women don't go getting greedy. White solidarity is crucial to maintaining white supremacy. So Sundance isn't concerned about sexual violence at all. The Cosby case went from cause celeb to a humiliation for the white media overnight. They wound up with egg on their faces. They couldn't stop Rachel Wood from making this documentary either, but they will try to control how many people see or hear about it. The white media has already made their calculation that the sexual misconduct train isn't going to stop rolling completely. It may slow significantly, but it's never going to stop completely. That this is going to more or less be part of the permanent landscape, but as far as they're concerned, they're going to shape that landscape. That's why they're keeping up the steady drumbeat of anti-black racist hit pieces. They're determined that if this is going to be the new normal, well, they're going to influence and determine what that normal looks like. Well, we've got a part to play in that too, to make sure that the Kamau dumbbells and the rest of the black bootlicks and suck-ups and the white media phonies understand that we see what they're doing and we're calling it out. They're not getting away with anything. Because you can have all of the bought and paid for sock puppet white media organizations that you want give rave reviews to Kamau Dumbbell's propaganda piece. But over here in the real world, in the black media, we're giving this garbage thumbs down. good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Shantez, Lochthies, Mouse, Lamar Cox, and Sermetrius Howard. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.